Hey there, and welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because, well, we're tackling something that I know almost every single one of us has been feeling lately. Just think about the sheer, undeniable exhaustion of modern life. I mean, we live in this era of completely unprecedented convenience, yet we are all so incredibly tired. We've got smart homes, instant communication, literally unlimited entertainment right in our pockets, but there's this chronic, almost universal inability to just shut our brains off. We're always on. We are constantly vibrating with this low-level hum of modern expectations. So today, we're going to unpack the fascinating research behind the psychology of uneasy rest, and specifically why you might actually be addicted to being busy. I want you to picture a scenario. You know the one. It's, say, 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. You've worked a long day, you've handled all your responsibilities, and you finally just collapse onto your couch. The intention here is to relax. But within 5 minutes, what happens? There's this creeping, totally inexplicable sense of anxiety. Maybe it's a tight feeling in your chest, or this sudden nagging thought that you really should be doing something else. It's a completely relatable mystery, right? Why does the simple act of sitting still suddenly feel like a personal failure? You plan to relax, you genuinely want to relax, and yet your brain just starts flashing red warning lights, signaling that by doing nothing, you're somehow falling behind. Now, notice the clear contrast here between these two mental states. True rest acts like that full blue battery you see. It's a period of actual mental and physical recharging. It's this restorative state where your nervous system finally gets to power down. But contrast that with the drained red battery of the illusion of rest. And honestly, this is what so many of us are trapped in right now, this anxious, guilt-ridden inactivity. You might technically be horizontal on the sofa, sure, but your mind, it's running an absolute marathon of to-do lists and should-haves. You aren't recharging your battery at all in that state. You're really just letting it drain while you idle in a state of high stress. And this brings us to a really vital concept, and it's something you definitely need to hear. This inability to truly rest is not a personal failing. Seriously. If you can't seem to just sit back and watch a movie without checking your email, you do not lack willpower. You aren't uniquely broken. What we're dealing with here is a specifically documented psychological phenomenon. The research points us directly to a psychological culprit that has essentially rewired how we process downtime. Over the years, we've been conditioned by our environments, our workplaces, and our own habits to view rest as an enemy to progress, rather than an absolute requirement for it. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the core concept at play. Researchers actually call this uneasy rest. It's defined as the psychological state where the very act of attempting to relax triggers feelings of guilt, anxiety, or an intense compulsion to perform a task. Think about how wild that is for a second. The cure for exhaustion, which is relaxing, has somehow become the trigger for anxiety. It is a complete inversion of our natural biological needs. Instead of feeling relief when the workday ends, the uneasy rest phenomenon means your brain immediately starts hunting for a new problem to solve. Why? Because the absence of a problem just feels deeply unsafe. So to see exactly how this plays out in real life, consider this incredibly familiar loop. Step 1, you attempt to relax. You sit down, maybe grab a book. Step 2, you experience that creeping guilt. The little voice in your head chimes in, hey, you didn't answer that email. Or, the kitchen counter isn't perfectly clean. And then step 3, you cave to the pressure and find a minor chore to perform. You get up to wipe the counter and suddenly you're reorganizing your entire pantry at 9 p.m. This is the uneasy rest cycle in action. It's a deeply ingrained habit loop where the anxiety of resting becomes so uncomfortable that doing a chore is literally the only way you can soothe yourself. But this actually builds into something even more profound. Psychologists don't just call this a bad habit. They frame it as an addiction. Notice that quote up there, why you are addicted to being busy. We really need to stop looking at busyness as some sort of badge of honor. I mean, in modern culture, when someone asks how you are, the default, almost celebrated answer is, oh, I'm so busy, right? But the data shows this constant motion isn't ambition. It is a literal psychological dependency. We're using busyness the exact same way someone might use a substance, to numb out, to avoid sitting with our own thoughts, and to generate this synthetic sense of importance. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the critical difference it highlights between getting necessary things done and using movement as a crutch. Look at the puzzle representing productivity. This is goal-oriented effort with a definitive end state. You have a task, you put the pieces together, you complete it, and you stop. Simple. But then look at busyness addiction. This is compulsive action. It's like a hamster running on a wheel, and it's designed specifically to soothe inner anxiety. There is no end state to busyness addiction, because the goal isn't to finish a task. The goal is simply to be doing something so you don't have to feel the discomfort of doing nothing. It's just motion for the sake of motion. So, if you're sitting there wondering if this applies to you, let's bring this science right into our daily habits and look at the specific symptoms of this dependency. Are you compulsively touching your devices? That's your brain surging for a micro hit of urgency just to justify staying active. What about the inability to sit in silence? If a quiet room makes you want to crawl right out of your skin, that is the busyness addiction fighting against the quiet. And perhaps the most dangerous symptom of all, equating your self-worth entirely with your output. If you only feel like a good or valuable person on the days you cross 10 things off a list, well, you're trapped in the uneasy rest cycle. So, the crucial point is this. Breaking free from this isn't as simple as just telling yourself to chill out. What we're facing is called the unplugging block, because we've spent years, maybe decades, training our brains to release dopamine only when we're being productive. Sudden inactivity literally feels like a threat. Our brains actively crave those quick hits of artificial achievement to mask the underlying anxiety. Without that constant drip of dopamine from crossing off a task, the brain panics. The unplugging block is that thick psychological wall of resistance you hit the very moment you try to do nothing. To overcome it, you have to actively train yourself to tolerate the discomfort of resting. You have to realize that the anxiety you feel isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. Actually, it's just a symptom of an addiction leaving your system. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to really sit with over the next few days. I want you to observe your own relationship with downtime. Next time you sit down, will you actually rest, or will you just find a new way to be busy? When that creeping guilt starts to rise up from the couch cushions, see if you can just sit there. Let it pass without jumping up to fold the laundry. True rest is a skill, and it's one we desperately need to relearn. Thank you so much for diving into this fascinating psychology with me. And my challenge to you today is this. Go do absolutely nothing for 5 minutes and just see what happens.